Well, the final
as it developed as a tropical storm out in the mid-Atlantic and moved on through, missing most of the islands, including the Bahamas, now bearing down on the southeast coastline of the United States. 32.9 north, 77.9 west, puts the center of the storm, the position of what is going on. But keep in mind that that center point, the effects of Hurricane Fran are felt hundreds of miles from the center of that storm. As John just pointed out, the 6 p.m. position would put it about 80 miles south of Wilmington, North Carolina. Still, John, with winds of 115 miles an hour, still moving fairly much to the north, slightly to the northwest at 16 miles an hour. That has not deviated much throughout much of the afternoon.
No, but that new 6 o'clock latitude, the longitude didn't change to be 33.1, so it's just north of 33 now.
Okay, as it continues to move on off, basically towards the north and somewhat towards the northwest. Again, with its close proximity to the coastline, we want to give you an idea of what kind of weather is experienced in those locations. So we'll first take you to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, to keep you updated on what's going on from Jeff Morrow. Jeff has been monitoring the storm throughout the afternoon and evening hours to show you what's been going on. Let's get an updated report from Jeff.
All right, Dennis. Well, the surf continues to be absolutely spectacular out here. At least 15-foot wave faces come crashing in from time to time. Randy, again, is going to pan out here to you. Just some huge sets of waves, maybe something you might expect in Hawaii, but maybe without all the rain and the really gusty winds out there. But this is hurricane surf, and it is spectacular. Probably something that a lot of folks here along the Grand Strand will remember for a long time. They're also going to remember that this hurricane, at least, is passing by just to the north. This is going to be a close call as far as overwash, but the eye, as you guys have been talking about, is going, it looks like, into southeast North Carolina. That puts us on the western side of the storm, and even though the waves are spectacular and the winds at times here have been gusting over 60 miles an hour, it's not going to be as bad as it could have been. So I think the Grand Strand pretty much breathing a sigh of relief. I don't want to give anybody a false sense of security to come on down to the coast or anything, but I think that from probably within the next hour or two, we'll probably be seeing some of the worst of it, and then probably it'll start to slowly slacken off as the hurricane heads to the north. And we have, of course, several more hours, in fact, an entire evening of some pretty nasty weather out here on the Grand Strand. But again, the good news for this area is that it looks like with the flow offshore and the tide actually going out, our storm surge problems will be at least minimized.
In fact, Jeff, I think an element of hope, too, would be the fact that it looks like it will be making landfall north and east of you at the time of low tide.
Exactly, Dennis, and that's another good thing. So with offshore winds, low tide, and even for the folks up farther north that are going to catch the brunt of this hurricane in North Carolina, the fact that the tide will be lower there as well, at least not at high tide, may help out just a little bit. I think with this Category 3 hurricane, we could use all the help we can get.
Jeff, winds, how are they picking up, and have you seen any damage from the winds?
Dennis, I've never seen something like this happen before. The two back windows in our van blew out because of the wind. There was just too much wind pressure. John talks a lot about the force of water on an object or the force of air. They're both fluids, and the air just exerted, evidently in a big gust, too much force on these two windows, and they exploded, and it was glass that flew everywhere. Fortunately, nobody was in the van, so that's some good news I can report. But yeah, we unfortunately, the Weather Channel crew sustained some damage.
Okay, let's hope you can stay safe the rest of the night. Jeff, thank you so much for a report coming to us from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and giving us an idea of what the elements of the wind and waves and the weather going on in that particular location. Looks like he was experiencing some pretty rough stuff, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Right, that's quite spectacular the way the waves are coming in. The waves there are coming in from the southeast, and the wind is blowing out of the north, and so that steepens the waves before they break.
Let's give everybody an idea of what it looks like from the satellite perspective. We'll go upstairs and look back down at it, and there you can see the eye of the storm as it continues to approach the North Carolina coastline, but the bands of cloudiness extend all the way up into New England, and some of the rain bands have already extended well into North Carolina.
And wherever you see the oranges on here, that's where the heavier rain is. A lot of it's still offshore, but a lot of that heaviest rain has already moved inland, as you can see. The eye of the hurricane still clearly visible offshore. but headed toward the coast.
And again, as we've been tracking the storm for many days, over almost 2 weeks now, it appears that as it's finally making landfall on the United States coastline, it looks like that eye is probably approaching very close to Cape Fear, the Wilmington area of North Carolina.
Yes, it's only about, 80 miles now south of Wilmington. That's 6 o'clock, so it's moving right on up there.
Okay, and as far as the bands of precipitation, we're seeing some pretty heavy echoes, which indicates some very heavy rainfall advancing on in past the coastline and working its way up towards Lumberton and Fayetteville and even on up towards areas like Cape Hatteras, North Carolina.
And that'll be spreading on up toward the north as the night goes on.
And that may be a big factor in the next couple of days as well, with very heavy rainfall.
What we're concerned about is places even far away from the beaches, because this, even though the hurricane dies, as all hurricanes do, once the eye comes ashore, the moisture still comes up there and the precipitation continues, and then over the eastern slopes of the mountains it'll be even worse. So we're afraid of some very heavy rains, possible flooding.
For the immediate future, hurricane warnings in effect, and as John has mentioned over the last 2 hours or so, anyone in the path of the hurricane warning, if you have not evacuated and you can still monitor the Weather Channel, then you should be pretty much writing it out where you're at right now.
And again, we would point out, though, that the folks down toward Wrightsville Beach certainly have escaped the worst part of this hurricane. There's no doubt about that.
One area they'll probably feel a major effect from this particular storm would be up the coastline from where Jeff was. We'll take you to Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, and give you an idea what's going on that. We'll turn to the cards over to Jim Cantori. Jim?
Well, Dennis and John, we continue to see some very, very strong winds picking up. Unfortunately, we're going to start to feel the brunt of Hurricane Fran as it continues to make its way onshore. As you said, about 80 miles to our south. We've heard hurricane force gusts here, no doubt about it. That eerie howl continues here in Wrightsville Beach. We're about 0.8 of a mile inland now. They asked us to leave the immediate beach, which was probably a wise idea, as we started to get the hurricane force winds there 2 hours ago, and they have definitely begun to move inland. There are signs of some damage in here, some minor damage, some shingles off of some roofs. We're starting to see some small trees down, a lot of debris, leaves and whatnot on the roadways. But I talked to a police officer who you may or may not be able to see behind me here. They're blocking the roadway onto the beach. No one obviously is allowed onto the beach. They're saying everything's going smoothly. People are generally cooperating this evening.
Jim, you used the Johnny Mercer Pier as your benchmark earlier today. Are you still able to see that pier, and what's the status now?
Well, Dennis, we've left that pier. We've come about 0.8 of a mile in and across the causeway. And when we did leave that pier, man, I'm telling you, waves were 15 to 20 feet. They were breaking on the base of that pier. And during Bertha, they were 4 feet over the top of that pier, so they could be even higher. Now, one good thing we have to report with regards to Fran is we do think that we're going to deal with storm surge at the time of low tide. Now, one area that may be affected just a little bit more is that Long Beach, or that Long Bay in southern North Carolina, where the eye wall may come in. It's kind of shaped like a contact lens on its edges, and the water may have gotten in there during high tide, but I doubt very much of it got out. So they'll probably feel the brunt of the storm surge with the eye wall coming very close to there.
Jim, with the most recent remembrance of Hurricane Bertha, almost in the same general area earlier in the summer, how were the people's response to when the warnings came out earlier today?
Well, Dennis, it was definitely excellent all the way from when I got here yesterday. People were ready. They were taking this seriously. And like I've been talking about, how much knowledge people have gained. Hey, I know what a Cat 1 is. I know what a Cat 3 is. I know what a Cat 4 is. And I know the difference between them and what that means. So I think people are well prepared. There are many shelters all the way up through eastern North Carolina that people are utilizing this evening. And we're kind of sheltered here from this hotel, or I would not be allowed to broadcast out there because I could not be able to withstand the wind. So we're protected, and so are folks this evening. As you mentioned, people that have not left, that still have the signal here and can catch the Weather Channel, it is the best thing to stay at home right now and ride this thing out. It is not safe to leave, as we are dealing with hurricane force winds, and conditions will worsen in the next several hours.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. Stay safe tonight. We'll keep you updated from your perspective of Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. Again, as you can see, that's difficult to hold that signal up through all this mess that's coming on in. Another vantage point we have it, we've shown you perspective from space, we've shown you the radar perspective, we have shown you the perspective from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. How about a perspective from a Hurricane Hunter plane? And I believe we're going to be hearing from one of the individuals that's on the flight right now. Unfortunately, at my fingertips, I don't have their particular name, but let's see if we can go to that Hurricane Hunter plane and find out some of the latest information that's taking place there.
Over.
I don't seem to be hearing
Try again.
Let's try again. Again to the Hurricane Hunter plane. This is the Weather Channel. Over.
Weather Channel, this is Yield 04, Major Doug Lipscomb from the Hurricane Hunters. How copy, over?
Okay, Major Lipscomb, can you give us an idea of what the conditions are as you're flying through the eye of this particular hurricane right now? Over.
Roger, Weather Channel, this is Yield 04. We are encountering a classic hurricane out here. We've had pressures down in the low 950s. Of course, you've been seeing that and reading our mail and reporting it to all the viewers out there. We've also had quite strong winds on the northern side of the storm. In fact, around the Cape Fear area, we were encountering winds at 10,000 feet at about 90 to 95 knots, and that's about 105 miles an hour. Over.
Major Lipscomb, as you've been passing through this hurricane several times during the course of this Thursday, can you give us an idea of any changes that have taken place in the last hour or so? Over.
This is Teal 04. Roger, we have had different shapes to the eye. It has changed from an elliptical eye to somewhat of a circular eye. In fact, we're in the eye right now, and we can see blue sky above us. In fact, the NOAA aircraft are out here with us, flying at different altitudes. We're all taking different looks at the storm, and we can see now some blue sky above us. We're in the eye of the storm at this time. Over.
Major, this is John Hope. Is your pressure still about 954 millibars? Over.
Weather Channel, this is Teal 04. That is affirmative. Pressure remaining at 953 millibar. We just had an extrapolated pressure of 952, but we're waiting for the dropson, that device that we drop into the center of the storm that will actually measure the pressure to fall down to the surface, and then we'll be able to give you an accurate reading on the pressure. Over.
Okay, thank you very much. We've heard from Major Doug Lipscomb from the Hurricane Hunters, flying right now through Hurricane Fran. That's over and out as far as our connections with them. John, what does that mean when we go from an elliptical eye to a circular eye?
Well, sometimes that could be a little bit better organized. That's why I was anxious to hear what the Major had to say about that. It is. I noticed on his last report it was a circular eye. And you notice he said he got an extrapolated reading of 952 millibars, and he's waiting for the drop sound. What they do, you can extrapolate the pressure down. They're flying at 10,000 feet, and using a standard tropical atmosphere, they can extrapolate down and come up with the pressure. But they drop a radio sound down in there, which actually measures the pressure and radios it back to these folks. And again, I want to say that we can't praise these people up too much. I think that we take them for granted sometimes. They're out there in this very rough assignment day and night, and give us the kind of information that we really need to track a hurricane the way we do.
All their activities throughout a very dangerous situation is saving a lot of lives on the ground here.
I'm sure it is.
Speaking about the storm and overall structure, we're also concerned about the storm surge as this comes on in a little bit later on tonight.
Right, it's going to, the sea comes up as the hurricane approaches. What we see is it does it gradually when the hurricane is this far offshore. It goes up to 2, 3, 4, 5 feet, something like that. But then if you're going to get to 12 to 16 feet, that comes in rather suddenly about the time the eye wall comes ashore.
And if for any element of hope, I guess it's coming in at low tide.
Well, we hope so. It will come in at low tide unless this thing slows down, if it moves the way it is. We had high tide this afternoon. Another one will be after midnight, and we think that the eye is going to come ashore in between the two high tides.
Okay, that's the information we got on Hurricane Fran from the beaches, from the air, and from here, the Forecast Center of the Weather Channel. Stay with us. If you're unable to stay with your Weather Channel right here on your cable dial, we urge you to dial your telephone, 1-900-WEATHER, or or perhaps on the internet weather system, www.weather.com. That'll get you plugged in too as well. So stay with us on the Weather Channel. We'll keep you informed. Right now, we'll break for this timeout.
It hurts, no doubt about it. What's going on right now? Obviously, the hurricane force winds, the hurricane is nearing. That roar is just unbelievable. It just is non-stopping right now, and it is an extremely eerie feeling. We have lost power. I talked to you last, so we're going off the truck power, and we may lose the signal before we finish with you. But heavy rain, wind, damage, we're going to see it all here with Hurricane Fran in Wrightsville Beach.
Jim, as long as we still have a signal, let's ask you this question. You've been to other hurricanes before. Give us a comparison.
Well, I was with Andrew in Baton Rouge. Of course, nothing like what you dealt with in Homestead. But this is as worse, if not worse, than what I dealt with Andrew in Baton Rouge. I mean, in the rain, it's much heavier rain. We have easily received a half a foot of rain here so far, and there has been tremendous flooding on the roadways. Hopefully you will be able to get some of the videos around here. A lot of overwash right now. There's a lot of flooding just from the rain alone, and we think that without a doubt it's going to be a while before some of this water recedes.
Jim, give us an idea of the intensity of the winds, and is there any variation in the wind direction the last hour or two?
Well, Dennis, I would imagine behind me is off to the northeast, so it's kind of coming, you know, at my back, but occasionally it's swirling around just because of the fact that we're at this hotel and the winds are getting the effect of the hotel involved too. But the wind has definitely picked up, no doubt about it. We are easily sustained, very near hurricane force, with occasional gusts over hurricane force, and I'm seeing a lot now. Tree limbs, they're getting a little bit larger. Not exactly what the folks want to hear at Myrtle Beach.
Okay, let's bring into the picture as well, in the Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Jeff Morrow. Jeff, the conditions you're experiencing appear a little bit different than what Jim is going through right now. Give us an update what you're experiencing.
All right, Jim, going through basically the heart of the hurricane, getting a little bit of an audio problem there, so I might not be able to answer any more of your questions, but I heard the first one, and that is that we are probably getting the worst that we're going to see here, probably from now until maybe the next hour or so. Randy's going to pan over here. We're actually able to look out and see some of the swells. Some of them have been upwards of 15 to maybe some of the far swells offshore that we've been seeing breaking from time to time, about 15 to 20 feet perhaps farther out. Again, no problems with any beach overwash. I was listening to some local radio reports. Believe it or not, Dennis, there were 2 people that were arrested in North Myrtle Beach for actually going out into this ocean and trying to swim. The police had to go out and basically drag them out of the water. It was an incredible story. I can't believe somebody would be as foolish as to go out and try to swim in a Category 3 hurricane, not in surf like this. This is extremely dangerous. We're getting some pretty intense rain squalls on the west side here, but again, the good news for the Grand Strand, even though we're getting some gusts, upwards of 60 and 65 miles an hour, the worst of it appears to be moving a little bit farther onto the north.
Okay, that's from Jeff Morrow. He's in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We also heard from Jim Cantori in Wrightsville Beach in North Carolina as they continue to focus in on the action right on the coastline. And again, it appears that Jim in much rougher weather. Of course, he's a lot closer to the center of the storm, but he will probably, John, have even rougher weather before the night's out.
Yes, I'm afraid so. I'm anxious to find out how far he is from the water and what his elevation is there. He needs to be careful maybe that things are getting rougher there. A lot of debris is going to be flying around.
In fact, he was already seeing some on the shot we just visited with. Let's also check the satellite perspective, give you that vantage point, and again detail the action from space, and you can see how the storm continues to inch its way very close to the North Carolina coastline. A closer examination, John, that eye looks like it's holding together, and from our friends at the Hurricane Hunters in our last report indicating more of a circular versus an elliptical eye over the last hour or so.
That may or may not mean that this is trying to pick up a little strength, but it's getting so close to shore it's not going to have much time to do it. While we have that picture up there, it's a good time to illustrate the fact that the really nasty weather extends out quite a lot farther to the east of the eye than it does to the west, and what a difference a few miles makes. You saw Jeff there in Myrtle Beach and Jim in Wrightsville Beach, and there wasn't much comparison in the weather that they were experiencing there. So as one travels from northeast South Carolina over to southeast North Carolina, things go downhill in a hurry.
You had made an observation at one of our most recent briefings here a few minutes ago in the Forecast Center, how the precipitation doesn't look like it's that extensive on the south side of the eye, the farthest point away from land right now, but how the precipitation quite extensive over to the north right now.
Right, I can't say for sure how much is down to the south, but looking at satellite pictures, I have an idea that that's not a very wide area. We'll see what it looks like when the radar gets up a little bit farther north. So far you can see a narrow band there, but there may be some attenuation and we're not seeing everything that's out there.
Let's give you an idea, though, where the two boys were. In fact, we had one, let me see if I can put this dot down in the right place, right about there would have been where Jim Cantori was, and right about there is where Jeff Morrow is. So the end result is you can see the type of weather they're going through. Right in here where Jim is going through some pretty rough squalls, and Jeff in this last report was just still in a little break between them, or of the heaviest precipitation. That gives you an idea of what the two were going with, affected with as far as the overall precipitation by just looking at the radar scan in that particular area. At this point, hurricane warnings, if you haven't left yet, you can still hear our voice or see our video. You need to stay exactly where you're at, as the tropical storm warning is still in effect on the periphery of that. They might experience tropical storm force winds. The hurricane force winds, as even reported by Jim Cantori, buffeting the North Carolina coastline right now where he's at Wrightsville Beach, and it looks like some of those are verified by the latest wind gusts in excess of 50 to 55. There's a 58-mile-an-hour wind gust at Wilmington, North Carolina. Another consideration we have to put into effect is the storm surge, John. What impact and what exactly is the storm surge will be for North Carolina?
The storm surge is the most dangerous part of the hurricane, we usually think, and most hurricanes that's been the truth. And the surge comes in the highest right where the eye comes ashore and on to the right, which in this case would be to the northeast some 40 or 50 miles. That's where we would expect to see the storm surge as much as 12 to 16 feet above the normal astronomical tide. Now, we would also point out here, though, that it looks as if the eye is coming ashore between the two high tides. We had a high tide there this afternoon. Another one will be after midnight. And if this hurricane arrives on schedule, if the eye does, it'll be coming into land between the two high tides.
That would be, if anything, a little bit of ray of hope.
That would take a few feet off what the total depth of the water would be.
Still, that storm surge is going to make an impact to any type of structure that's close to the beach.
Oh yes, any type of structure that gets battered, because the storm surge, the tide actually comes up, and then on top of that you have these tremendous waves, and it's the battering effect of the waves that is very hard on the buildings.
And as I've learned from the great professor of hurricane technology and meteorology, is the fact of 1 cubic yard of water weighs 1,700 pounds, so what an impact that would make on any structure.
Tremendous impact.
And also another consideration we have to have is the possibility of spawning tornadoes, especially on the northeast or front right quadrant of the hurricane as it comes on in.
So far we haven't seen it reported, but a lot of times we don't see those until the eye of the hurricane comes ashore. And then I also want to point out they don't normally happen very close to the eye. They're more likely to occur in some of the outer rain bands.
So that tornado watch in effect to midnight covers much of North Carolina and back into South Carolina with the anticipation of this hurricane making landfall. And I don't think we're going to hear the end of Fran just at the time it makes landfall and we're going to forget about it. I have a feeling it's going to make an impact for the next couple of days.
Well, we want to point out, sort of like Hugo, that we expect to see hurricane force winds and gusts anyway, extending about 100 miles inland. Now that's going to be enough to topple trees and bring down power lines. And then the heavy rain is going to move inland even after the hurricane dies down. It's no longer a hurricane or maybe even a tropical storm. Could even be a depression. That we get these heavy rains in the states to the north, through North Carolina, up into Virginia, into West Virginia, into Maryland, and to Pennsylvania anyway. All those states could receive excessive rains on top of what already is saturated ground.
And that could even cause some problems with bringing down some trees with loosened soil.
Possibly.
All righty. That's the very latest on Category 3 Hurricane Fran. Again, those that are still viewing the Weather Channel along the coast, we urge you to write it out where you're at now. Don't try to move from that location. There's going to be some down power lines, down trees, a good possibility you're going to lose electricity, so be prepared for that. And tomorrow morning, don't expect to get back to the beaches because there's going to be some problems. Please listen to your local emergency management officials for the proper time to head on on back. And for those farther inland, as John was just explaining, anticipate down trees, down power lines, gusty winds, and very heavy rainfall for even states farther to the north over the next couple of days. Of course, we'll keep you posted from the beaches of North and South Carolina, that perspective, our satellite perspective, radar, and a whole lot more. So stay with us here on the Weather Channel for the latest update on Hurricane Fran. Right now, we're going to check out the forecast for the rest of the country. Let's return to the studio with Declan Cannon.
Is for the have pilings and have the floor above the level that this water is going to come.
And one of